last year, Oliver Bullock of The Guardian wrote an article called "The Fall of Jersey: How a Tax Haven Goes Bust." Did anyone here see the article?
No. Yeah.
Some. There's a few copies of it also on the tables, in case anyone wants to jog their memory. What I want to do before we have our interview is a quick exercise based on the opening of that article. Because the article seeks to characterise Jersey in a pithy word or saying. And I'll give you a couple of ways it does that. It calls Jersey an island of patchwork fields and wooded dingles in between. It calls it an island of 4 square buildings and well-groomed lawns. It calls it an island that is lush and verdant and set in a sparkling procession of eastward marching waves. He's not really a business article writer, he's a poet. Eh? It says it's a bit of Devon that ran away to sea and did rather well for itself. He describes it as being cleaner and busier and neater and brighter than almost any seaside town in the British mainland. He describes it as 45 square miles of self-governing ambiguity surrounded by water. He says that Jersey looks rich, but appearances are deceptive. He says it's an island run by gentlemen farmers, some bunch of Bertie Woosters in need of a Jeeves. And he goes on to describe a curiously anarchic economist who came to the island 40 years ago, but more of that later. So, as our opening exercise, does anyone have a pithy word or saying that for them characterises this place in which we live? How do any of you describe Jersey?
Heaven.
Jersey is a bit of heaven, or it's all of heaven. Any others?
An island in the sun.
An island in the sun, lovely.
Falling short of its potential.
Jersey is something that falls short of its potential, okay? Jersey as an anomaly. Somebody explained to me that Jersey is a peculiar, and actually that is a very technical legal definition. That Jersey happens to be a peculiar, but not Jersey could also be described as a peculiar place. We have 2 more. Anyone wants to get their little pithy word or phrase description of Jersey before we start?
The sort of place people come on holiday and literally fall in love with the place because it's so different to anywhere else.
A place that people fall in love with. And quite unexpectedly, I came to Jersey for 2 weeks, and that was about 14 years ago. And I'm sure many other people had a similar experience who weren't as blessed as we were here.
Victor Hugo described it as a little bit of France that was dropped in the sea.
A little bit of France that was dropped in the sea. So we've had a little bit of Devon and a little bit of France. And Jersey is a little bit of all of these things, because Jersey is something we've all got a view and a perspective on, which is why the article, when it came out, generated so much interest and reaction, and why I hope today, by getting Colin's perspective, we'll have a little bit more of an exploration of what Jersey means, what Jersey's past has been over these last 40, 50 years, and some of Jersey's future. So, that in mind, come join. So we're very privileged today to have Colin with us. Colin has served the island of Jersey for I think 46 years in various senior and advisory capacities. And how is your role with respect to Jersey described today?
My role today is very easily described. I advise the Chief Minister on international affairs. So my role is very much dealing with other jurisdictions, particularly in the area of tax agreements and other international agreements.
And today I want to talk a little bit about the Guardian article, but also I want to have an opportunity for us to hear a little bit about you. So I wonder if you can just start with what exactly brought you to the island in 1969, something that the article picks up on a bit.
Well, after university, I was working in the government of Northern Ireland as an economic advisor. I was there for 6 years, and I thought maybe it was time for change. And an advertisement appeared asking for someone to apply for the post of economic advisor in Jersey. And that sounded like a particularly interesting post, and so I applied for it and was successful in obtaining it. I think that that was the first economic advisor. I think the government of the day wasn't sure what they were getting with an economist, so they only were prepared to offer it on a 5-year contract on the basis that they didn't like it. They wouldn't be committed to it continuing. So they were obviously sufficiently engaged to extend it, and so I'm still here.
So those 5 years
those 5 years have rather extended. I mean, the interesting, I mean, very appetite to what's going on at the present time is that the reason the government of the day decided they needed an economist was that Jersey was faced with the problem of what to do against the background of the United Kingdom applying to join what was then called the Common Market. And the real need to have an understanding as to what was happening in Jersey, what was influencing the economy, and therefore what the impact might be of the UK joining, and whether the island would require special terms to satisfy itself against the background of the nature of the economy at that time. So it was felt that an economist might help in that analysis, and then hence the desire to have an economic advisor for the first time.
And did you find that Jersey EEC analysis was characterised in those 5 years, or were your perceptions changed as to what the issues needed to be?
Oh, I think that the position, I mean, it's interesting that there's an awful lot of déjà vu with what we're now faced with. Although there it's a case of the island being faced with the UK going into the European community, it then was known. Now it's the opposite, the possibility that the United Kingdom might vote to go out. But the issues are very much the same. So it's quite good to some extent to have been involved in those discussions that long ago. And so it's also an advantage in the sense that in talking about the experience of 1969, 1970, is that there are very few people looking around this room. I probably nobody who was around at the time like me, and therefore can challenge what I say. So it's quite a nice position to be in.
And the article described that first came the millionaire tax exiles and then the bankers, and that the values and conversation of the City of London were imported into this place. Is that what you saw in the late 60s and early 70s, or do you think he's missed the point there?
Well, I mean, it is an interesting picture. I mean, and one of the things that I promised that I would do if time allows is that I would write on the basis of having been involved since 1969 and obviously having some understanding of what happened in the 1960s, is to write a history of Jersey as an international finance centre. I mean, certainly write in that in the 1950s, 1960s, Jersey was receiving a lot of immigrants, not necessarily in the category that we now have in when we talk about wealthy immigrants. A lot, significant proportion of the people coming there were people retiring from the former colonies. And as an adjunct of that, those who remained in the colonies as they became independent, who were British expatriates, had a wish to put their funds in banks close, if not in, the United Kingdom. And so this business opportunity was presented, and a number of the British merchant banks like Hill Samuel and Kleinwort Benson, Hambros, saw this opportunity and established offices in Jersey to receive that business. So in the 1960s, it was mainly attracting deposits from British expatriates around the world. The kind of international development really took place in the 1970s with the action taken by the United Kingdom to restrict the area of what was then the sterling area, which meant that international banks that wanted, again, to tap into the sterling market had very few places to go other than the United Kingdom, and so they were attracted to Jersey. So we had big increase in banks in the early part of the 1970s.
So the article doesn't at all touch on that retraction of the old British Empire and the post-colonial move, but instead focuses on UK fiscal policy as driving money into Jersey.
Yes, I don't think they're correct in that respect. I mean, I think that one of the interesting things about UK fiscal policy was that UK fiscal policy, quite, you might say appropriately, was designed to limit the opportunities for UK residents to use Jersey. We had a number, I mean, I met many journalists who turned up, maybe like the journalists who wrote the article for The Guardian, who would turn up and say that because of the fiscal decision being made as part of the budget in the United Kingdom, that's the end of Jersey. You're finished as an international finance centre. In fact, the British decisions were a good thing for Jersey, because what happened was that whereas, as I say, through the 1960s, the emphasis was very much on the expatriates, the British and also a lot of people from the United Kingdom who were using Jersey at that time. As that market was closed down by UK fiscal action, then the financial institutions decided that their future lay in attracting business from around the world. And so we got a diversification of markets, a diversification of customers, particularly Africa and the Middle East and Far East, which to some extent probably wouldn't have happened if the UK had not made those changes, because people were very comfortable about taking business from the UK, whereas with those opportunities then removed, they went out and found these new opportunities, which made the island a much stronger international finance centre.
And when are you saying that shift was taking place?
So that took place through the 70s and 80s, I mean, and into the 90s even. There was progressive changes in fiscal policy as the United Kingdom government sought to limit the opportunities for UK residents to engage in tax avoidance. It was legitimate, but they closed down the opportunities, particularly say like people could have had UK residents could afford a trust and thereby have limited their exposure to UK taxation. So they closed down those opportunities. And so that led to diversification, and that was helped by the fact that in 1979 the British government, which was then Mrs. Thatcher, came into power. She removed exchange control, which opened up Jersey again to international business when it hadn't been quite so open before. So the 1980s were then an expansion of the finance centre activities internationally, as it were, stimulated by that openness through the ending of exchange control, and stimulated also by the fact that they had to go looking for other markets.
What have been the broad trends of the last 10 to 15 years as Jersey has shifted again into a different role in the global financial market?
I think the last, certainly the last 10 years, I think that the difference of focus has been the increase in international focus on finance centre activities and the importance of information exchange and transparency, which was kind of escalated particularly following the crisis in 2007-2008, when G20 was saying that they thought that in part the crisis was due to a lack of transparency. So, but that international scene, kind of setting of international standards for anti-money laundering, setting of international standards for tax information exchange, which took place really at the end of the 1980s, into the 1990s and onwards, and into where we are today, was really the change that took place. And I think Jersey was in a fortunate position there in that one of the things that we had decided right at the beginning of the 1970s was that if Jersey had a long-term future as an international finance centre, it would have a long-term future if it set its sights on being a quality centre. So one of the things we did at that time in the 1970s, 1972, was to set a policy of only licensing banks which were in the world's top 500, which meant that we haven't had kind of bank collapses, and we've had a much more secure position. So we had a kind of a policy of it was flowed from that, and so the adoption by Jersey government of the principle that we should seek to comply with international standards, which is what we've done certainly in the last 10 years quite progressively, was not a difficult one to take on board.
One of the things the article laments, I think, is the shift from the three core foundations of the Jersey economy to an ever-increasing reliance on finance. In what ways do you think that's been a good thing for Jersey?
Well, one of the problems, and this is one of the things that one ascertained right at the beginning, certainly when I came to Jersey, was that one of the problems when you're a small jurisdiction like Jersey is that it's very difficult to have more than one, as it were, major industry, dominant industry. If you have a dominant industry, it tends to, as you expect, suck in resources, it tends to pay more for those resources and therefore attracts them. But it's quite difficult to, in a small economy, to actually get that diversification, which is it's obviously an objective to strive for, but it's very difficult. And so when I came to the island, the dominant industry was tourism. Then it was kind of over 50% of the economy was kind of related to tourism. And again, it's a kind of fascinating, those who kind of could remember those times, was that the island was very concerned, lots of letters to the JEP complaining about the dominance of the tourism industry and how we ought to diversify. And to the point that we got to 1978 with a proposition before the states requiring the states to agree that there should be a ceiling put on the number of registered beds at 25,000 so that we could stop the growth of tourism. Characteristically, which is often the way with governments, they bring in those measures just when the market is going to do the job for them. And so immediately after the decision to cap it at 25,000, everybody started taking their holidays in Spain, and the numbers dropped, and now we're down to, 13,000 beds without any kind of government interference in the process. So at that time, I said it was very dominant, and so I think it is difficult. But I think that there are opportunities. I've always taken the view there are opportunities for strengthening and the tourism industry and also maintaining a successful agricultural industry. But it is more difficult when you have you're always going to have one relatively strong industry. And that's a historic feature of Jersey. I mean, I think it's not something novel, it's not something we just acquired. Those of you who have a loving of history will know that right at the beginning of the 18th century, I think it was, maybe in the previous century, that the states had to pass a law that required the men of the island to stop knitting and go and work in the fields, because there was such a boom. The dominant industry then was the knitting industry, and everybody was kind of engaged in the knitting industry, and to the detriment of other activities. So it's not.
We also heard in a previous event how the rise and fall of the Jersey shipbuilding industry had a dramatic effect on the.
Yes, they tend to have these kind of dominating kind of periods when there's a domination by a particular sector of the economy.
Now, as you heard at the beginning, CHOW is a faith-based initiative, and so I've got a moral question. We seek to integrate a faith-based analysis with a practical understanding of life today. So, has the finance industry been a force for good, or a force for wickedness, or a neutral phenomenon that has no impact on a question like that?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. I mean, I think that every sector of the economy and every part of our life in the island has a contribution to make to almost all three of those points. In other words, it's very difficult to say that everything is good or everything is bad or neutral. There's a bit of all in it. But I think that clearly there are good things in the sense that certainly if you take the period that the finance industry has grown, it has contributed substantially to the revenues of the states. It's made a lot of difference to the expenditure that's been able to be undertaken for education and health by what it was in the 1960s. And to that extent, insofar as the quality of public services is a force for good and something from which the island residents as a whole benefit from, then that's a good element. On the other hand, you might say, the materialism that goes with economic growth and the kind of the riches that come with economic growth, obviously bring in stresses and strains which some people find very difficult to accommodate and live with, and some people would argue there is a certain aspect of that which is not good for the society. Others would take the view that, well, it's a bit of both and we can be happy with where they stand. So I don't think it's quite a simple answer to the question you posed.
I've got a question that may not have a simple answer either, because none of us will be interested to know how your own faith or values have influenced the way you've approached the challenges you outlined over the last few minutes with respect to Jersey.
Well, I think that it's a good question too, in the sense that we often get the putting it round with people sometimes say, well, are you a Christian? And can you be a Christian if you don't go to church? And I think that a lot of people say that, well, you can practice the morals and the mores of Christianity without necessarily being someone who goes to church. And I think it's important, I think, the way one lives and the way one contributes to the community in which one lives. And I've always taken the view, certainly as a government employee and working as civil servant, working as economic advisor and then chief advisor, and now as advisor on international affairs, that my job is to serve the community. And I think so. There is, I think, a parallel in that if one recognises that one's role is to try and do what you think is right and good for the community, and serve your community as well as you can, I think there's a common purpose there with the principles of Christianity.
Just bring it on to Jersey in the present. If you were writing the paper you perhaps wrote 47 years ago today, are there any highlights around Jersey's financial health, or its international reputation, or its society and community that you particularly want to draw note to?
Well, I think that there is a lot. As we were talking about déjà vu with things like the European Union, but certainly a number of people who've bothered to go to second-hand bookshops and pay, I think they're probably selling at about 20p. My economic survey of Jersey, very, very easily obtained. That if you pick it up, some of the people who bothered to pick it up and read it as a cure for insomnia, have said that there's an awful lot in it that is still relevant to today. So there is a lot of déjà vu. But I mean, there have been changes. I mean, I think that certainly in the last 5 years, we have seen significant change and benefit in the way in which we're perceived by the international community. Certainly I find, and I've been very much involved with the international scene, is that in our discussions with countries like France, Germany, the United States and others, and also the international organisations like the OECD, the International Action Task Force on Money Laundering, is that their view of us has changed significantly and for the better over the last 5 years. And that's because we have really reinforced our message of transparency and information exchange. The fact that we were one of the early adopters of the new international standard on automatic exchange of information made a tremendous difference and has improved our relationships with countries and with international organisations. So I think that we have made significant movement in that direction. I think the other thing, which we touched on earlier, which I think is helpful for the island, is that the diversification of the finance industry has been enhanced in recent times. Again, because of the nature of world economic growth and wealth creation, also again the pressures that one has been under to diversify and look for new markets, has meant that when people talk about the finance industry, sometimes they think of it as one industry. In fact, it's the multiplicity of different segments in terms of markets and also products. And the finance industry now is a lot stronger than it was even in its youthful state of the end of 1960s, early 1970s.
Well, that strength might lead us on into the next question I've got, which again references the headline of the Guardian article, the future, and in Bullock's words, this is a future of a tax haven going bust. How do you see the future of Jersey?
Well, I've always been an optimist. Perhaps I wouldn't still be here if I wasn't an optimist. But I mean, I always remember Winston Churchill. One of Winston Churchill's quotes was that he was an optimist because he couldn't see any point in being anything else. And I think that's right. You know, I think you've got to have an optimism. And I think that one of the things about Jersey, and this again is historic. I mean, it's not something that's just the last 50 years, but I think the last 50 years have shown it to be true again. Is that Jersey is very small, and that's an advantage. It's got industries, even if we're looking at tourism or agriculture, but certainly in the finance sector, there are industries which worldwide are very large, and we're looking for a very small share of very large markets. There are plenty of opportunities out there. There's no shortage of opportunities for Jersey, but whether we take advantage of those opportunities is really up to us, and the policies that we adopt, and the ability of the states or the island generally to create an environment which is conducive to the strengthening and development of tourism or agriculture or the finance sector. If we create the right environment, the opportunities are there, and I can't see any reason why Jersey should be any less successful in the future than it has been successful in the past. And I think the other point I would say is that message which I've just sought to give, which may or may not be accepted, is one that has been certainly accepted by a number of international bodies. And one of the points that I would say in response to the Guardian article is that I put much more weight on the views of, say, an organisation like Standard & Poor's, who've done a rating of Jersey and given it a high rating. I would put much more weight on the anti-money laundering Moneyval and the Financial Action Task Force in looking at our standards, and I would also put more weight on the OECD Global Forum and the rating that they've given us in terms of our compliance with the international standards on exchange of information and transparency. And it is that has given us the base for future growth. The fact that I was saying earlier that we're more accepted internationally, that notwithstanding those standards, there are still many business opportunities out there. We're a niche market operator, and a niche market operator can always find some opportunities to take advantage of. So I certainly do not share the pessimism of the Guardian journalists.
And just as we conclude this part of our discussion, and you've achieved so much over the last 47 years that your career has been here in Jersey, is there any one reflection that you have looking back as we have over that time?
Well, I suppose if I have a reflection, I would tend to personalise it, I think. I mean, I think that the reflection I have is that making the decision I did in 1969 to leave Northern Ireland and come here was a very good decision on my part. I mean, it was, you might say, a good decision in the sense that when I was in Northern Ireland was quite peaceful, and the trouble started in August 1969, 9 months after I left. Some might say they were writing to get me back, but I wouldn't like to suggest that. But the fact was that it was fortuitous. I mean, I didn't know that was going to happen, but as I said earlier, I saw the need for past is new, and I've never regretted it. And my children, who have grown up in Jersey, have benefited from the quality of life of this island. And I sometimes, if I have any kind of comment I sometimes make is that I feel that, I mean, I'm an immigrant, and as they say sometimes about those who are converted to a religion, they are more fanatical about the religion than those who have always been in religion, that I'm perhaps more fanatical about Jersey than perhaps some of the Jersey people. And I think sometimes the Jersey people don't recognise and realise how lucky they are